It's time now for the John Harris Podcast on the airnetwork.net. Now, here's sports journalist extraordinaire, John Harris on the Air Network.
Welcome to the John Harris Podcast on the airnetwork.net. I'm John Harris, joined today by Mike Detillier, NFL Draft Report guru, the author of Mike Detillier's Draft Report 2017. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you, John.
Good. We're going to just talk a little bit about the report. You've been doing it for a while now. Just give folks a little bit of the background, how long you've been doing it. Talk a little bit about yourself, your background. As folks can hear right away, you got that special way of talking. So we're going to talk a little bit about where you're from and some of the areas of football that you specialize in.
Well, I'm from South Louisiana. Actually, I just live in a hop, skip, and jump away from New Orleans. So, but it's 30 years for me doing this. I've been involved with WWL Radio 870 in New Orleans, and it's the biggest radio station out in the Deep South, and covering the Saints, Southeast Conference, LSU. And so for me, it's branched out into a lot of different other areas and working for other companies. But it's 30 years for me putting out the draft report. And again, from the accent, you can tell I'm not from Oregon.
I've been reading this report now. You sent me a copy. I got it the other day. Every year I've been reading it, man. It's getting bigger and better. I mean, you really do a thorough job. I love the way you analyze each player by position, but you really break it down. You talk about their start, where they went to high school, how they were rated coming out of high school. Then you get into their college career. You go over their college career and what they accomplished in college, and then you talk about how that projects to the NFL level. So I think it's really unusual. The way you do it is different than a lot of other draft reports because you saw a lot of these guys at the high school level. So you talk with a lot more knowledge and understanding of some of these players and some of these other so-called gurus where they jump in on it, they're looking at tape, the last year or so, but you've followed the progress of a lot of these players for a long, long time.
Yeah, John, one of the things I've been fortunate in doing is that I have worked a lot of these summer camps. And so you get an opportunity to see these young men as juniors, seniors in high school, and then certainly cover their career at the college level. I try to do the report like a report would be sent into the NFL from a scout. I got an opportunity very early in my career to get some help from a former scout who kind of showed me this is what I send in. And so I tried to do something similar in that just think about the NFL. How many guys who were not productive at the college level have been really good NFL players? I bet you're talking about maybe 2% of guys in the NFL. Most of those people that are playing in the NFL have been were very productive college players, and they may have had a little detour. We see some guys that have played college basketball that have went on to play, and especially at the tight end position. But it's rare that you see a guy that was not productive at the college level and not productive at the high school level become a really good NFL player. So there is that connect the dots there. And so I try to do it in that manner and giving you a little insight on where they were. Now, ratings coming out, if it's Rivals, 247, whatever, everybody's subjective, opinion-wise. But I want to kind of tell you a story if they were highly recruited, if they were not highly recruited, and their production at the college level, and then break it down. I don't want to write it like a scout would write it. I want to write it so that the everyday fan would understand it and understand what type of athlete. So if you've never seen him play and you read the report, you would know what type of athlete he is. And so that's been kind of how I've run with it for the last 30 years, and it's been very successful for me. I can't watch every player every week, so I spend a lot of time watching a lot of film, but I get to know that player a lot today because of all these camps that are involved. So you see them very, very early in their life, and it's a big help. It's a big help to kind of formulate maybe where that guy was at 16, 17, where he is at 21, 22.
We're speaking with Mike Detillier, the author of the Mike Detillier's Draft Report 2017. Mike, before we even get into it, let's start right now. Tell the listeners how they can get to. I'm telling you, I'm looking at it right now. It's 210 pages, nice, slick, glossy cover. You've got the one I got here has Leonard Fournette, the LSU running back, on the front, Solomon Thomas, and Adoree Jackson from USC also on the cover. Mike, how can folks get a copy of this? I know it's still available. The draft is 2 weeks away?
Yeah, a couple weeks away, and we'll get it out to you first class. You can get it on MikeDetillier.com and also off of SaintsReport.com. And crazy thing on the covers, I knew Leonard Fournette when he was 13 years old. I scouted Solomon Thomas when he was 16 years old. Adoree Jackson, I saw him play at 15 years old at a camp. And so it does go to show kind of to connect the dots that you had. I've known Leonard a lot longer because of, where he grew up. But Solomon was a Texas kid, so I got to see him play quite a bit, and Adoree was at basically every camp that you could imagine. He was such a tremendous athlete when he came out of high school. So, yeah, SaintsReport.com, also MikeDetillier.com.
You spell Detillier for the folks.
Okay, it's Detillier. Again, Detillier, MikeDetillier.com, and also SaintsReport.com.
I'm telling you, folks, it's really nice. You want to have it if you follow the draft, college football, NFL. It really gives you a lot of background on all of the players, and like Mike says, in a different kind of way, really gives you a history of them. Not just now what they did, ran the 40 at the combine. That's when everybody starts to pick up the draft, but well before that in their careers. Mike, let's look at this draft. How do you I'm hearing mixed signals on, how strong of a draft it is, how strong of a draft it isn't. After putting this together, how did you leave? What are your thoughts on this draft? How impressed are you, especially at the top of the draft? Because that's what everybody looks at.
Well, the top of the draft, I've done a lot better. But no, to be honest with you, I've done better draft classes at the top.
Really?
But it's the thickest and the best draft class I've done because legitimately I have 22 first-round pick players. Okay. From 23 to 85, it is as razor close as you can get. And I think that's the thickness of this draft class. From the late part of round one all the way up into the third round, it's as good as I've ever done in 30 years. Wow. It's the best draft class I've ever done at tight end, and it has more prospects and better prospects in the secondary than I've ever done in 30 years. You could potentially see 17 to 19 defensive backs taken in the first 65 picks.
Wow.
That's how thick a class it is in the secondary. And at tight end, it's been a long time that you've seen this type talent at the tight end position. It's amazing. So that's where it's really thick. There's just never enough pass rushers for the NFL, and that's the big drop-off. And a lot of that certainly has to do with why you have so many defensive backs. And it's a good year for receivers. Not a great year, but a good year. It's got a lot of numbers in the middle rounds, especially where I think you can pick up some pretty good players there. That a lot has to do with 7-on-7. I think you're starting to see it more and more now filtrate into the NFL, where you get big numbers in the secondary and wide receiver, and now you've got this signature tight end class. Mm-hmm. But where you don't have numbers in this draft class, offensive line, especially at tackle, it's a weak year at the offensive tackle position. And the other part of it is that the quarterback position to me is a lot of uncertainty. But
Yeah.
the NFL has 13 to 15 teams either looking now or looking into the looking glass for an eventual starter, and that's just not enough of it. That's where 7-on-7 hasn't hit. You haven't developed all those quarterbacks because of the spread game, because none of what's done in the spread equates to what you do in the NFL at all. But you can practice coverage, and you can practice route running 7-on-7 basically year-round when you're not playing football. So I think that's why, John, I think we're looking at this not only for this year but down the road. The numbers will always be really thick at wide receiver in the secondary because you're getting that coming out of the college ranks. And where it's failed is a lot of 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" guys that would have played outside linebacker, defensive end. They're playing wide receiver or tight end in the college ranks. So the numbers aren't there, or they are playing college basketball. That's the other part. So you've got a little bit of a pull. I work with Bobby Hebert, who played in the NFL in the 80s and 90s. And, Bobby always says, when he played in the NFL, there were probably 24 elite pass rushers in the NFL at that time frame. Today, John, if you got a dozen, you lucky. It's the big drop-off you see, and a lot of it has to do with guys deciding, you know what, I'm going to play college basketball, or they say, you know what, this is a pitch-and-catch game. I want to play wide receiver or tight end instead.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mike, about the quarterback situation with the 7-on-7. Makes a lot of sense, and if that's the case, I know next year's I've been hearing the next year's quarterback class is supposed to be pretty.
It's really good.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like you said, that quarterback position is always going to be, I guess, as a result, overvalued. You look at, like you say, you look at this year's class. Now I hear there's some talk about Trubisky from North Carolina possibly being considered for the number 1 overall pick with the Browns, or debating with him or Myles Garrett. I don't know. We can get some of your thoughts on that. Who do you have as your number 1 overall player?
The Browns can't overthink this. It's Myles Garrett. Now, I understand why you would throw names out.
Yeah.
I'm sure Trubisky's name will be thrown out. I'm pretty sure over the course of time, Leonard Fournette's name will be thrown out. But you can't overthink this. The best player in this draft class is Myles Garrett. I've seen him since he was 16 years old. He was an elite high school player. His first 2 years in college, he was an elite edge rusher. He had an ankle injury last year that he tried to play through, and he wasn't as dominant as we've seen him in the past. But you're talking about a guy who, when I watch edge rushers, one of the things I look for is, can they bend the edge and almost like a speed skater? Can they get low, keep that balance, and then turn speed into power to get to the quarterback or get to the ball carrier? Myles Garrett can do that extremely well. Huge wingspan. Everybody talks about his hot and cold motor, and that part is true. Name me another edge rusher that's consistent. Most edge rushers, when they come out of high school and college, they do kind of have that stock market run where they'll play great in one game, not quite as great. Because, listen, doing this 30 years, you can't tell me one guy that plays great every game. That doesn't happen. It just doesn't. But you get the sense here you've got a special athlete who has been dominant, and he, when you're the Browns, you don't have the special quarterback today, and you don't have the special edge rusher. Here you've got a guy that you can favorably compare a lot to Jadeveon Clowney coming out of college. Now, I think he's got a hotter motor than Clowney did coming out of South Carolina. He's a little bit bigger. I think he's a little faster. He's not quite as quick or as explosive off the edge, but he's bigger and he's faster, and he's coming clean. He's a guy that's not coming in with a lot of the issues knee-wise that Clowney did. Now, he had the ankle injury, but, that type injury normally is a 6 to 7 week injury to come back from. He played every week or tried to during the season. So the Browns can't overthink this at this point. They've got to go with Myles Garrett. But I understand feeding that to different people to see if maybe, just maybe, some team will bite. I'm not as high as on Mitchell Trubisky as some are. I'll be honest with you. To me, the best quarterback in this draft class is Deshaun Watson. And you can't convince me that a one-year starter at North Carolina is a better player than Watson. In many ways, I look at Trubisky similar to Alex Smith coming out of Utah, who was the first pick in that year.
Yeah.
He's not quite as tall. His accuracy skills are at a similar manner. But what I watch, too, is what do you do in the biggest games, in the biggest outlets? Look at Watson and what he's done for Clemson. He's played the best defense in college football off their feet in back-to-back years. Beat them once and did everything but beat them the year before. He's beat Florida State back-to-back years with a lot of talent going up against. Look at what Trubisky has done in the big games. He hasn't played at the highest level. What's the big knock on Alex Smith? Been a tremendous regular season quarterback, but when you get to the big games, he hasn't won it. He hasn't done it for you. And so I think there's a lot of similarities between Trubisky and Alex Smith, who's a good NFL quarterback, but not an elite one. And a guy like Deshaun Watson, who, when I look at him, he's got attributes similar to, he's a bit of a mix between Dak Prescott and Marcus Mariota. He can make plays with his feet. He can throw well off the run. His accuracy skills are in the mid-60s. Did he throw more interceptions than you'd like a year ago? Yeah. But, I do work with a lot of quarterbacks week in, week out. And even Archie Manning and I were talking about this a week ago. He said, you just got years you throw more interceptions than you normally would. Other than last year, that wasn't the knock on Watson. But big games, being able to step up in the biggest games and being accurate. He's been a mid-60s completion rank passer. And in the biggest and the hottest spotlight, Watson has come through. So I understand, Trubisky being from Ohio and that sort of thing. But you know what? You better pick the best player here because he's a better prospect than RG3 was coming out of Baylor. He's a more accurate passer. And the thing about it, I can't teach him. He's a leader. Talk to the coaches and players at Clemson, and they tell you what type of leadership skills he possesses. It's amazing. So I understand the Trubisky part and that sort of thing, but if I'm picking for the Browns, and at one, there's no question it's Garrett, and if I'm picking for them with that real early, again, first-round pick, and Deshaun Watson's on the board, I pick him.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Mike, I mean, with the number one pick, you get Garrett. There's still going to be quarterbacks to be had at number 12 if that's where they want to go. And like you say, Trubisky might be there if that's who they want. He might still be there or Watson.
Yeah, I really think that there's a scenario where you may see all the quarterbacks there at 12 when you get ready to pick again. But this is also a league that is fueled by the quarterbacks. And one of the things I think we're going to see over the next 5 to 6 years, or 4 to 5 years, is we have all lived through the golden age of quarterbacks. And now in back-to-back years, you lose an NFL Hall of Famer in Peyton Manning. Tony Romo will not go into the Hall of Fame, but he would go into the Hall of Very Good, as far as I'm concerned. But put 5 years on. Tom Brady's not playing 5 years.
No.
Drew Brees is not playing 5 years. You look at Phillip Rivers. He's not playing 5 years. Ben Roethlisberger's not playing another 5 years. Put 5 years on Aaron Rodgers. Yeah. And so now all of a sudden tell me who's going to be the elite guys. You got a maybe guy in Derek Carr, who I think a lot of in Oakland. I think he's a tremendous player. Maybe Andrew Luck. He has shown it when he's healthy. He's been a good player. You got Cam Newton, who has been kind of a rocky ride in the NFL. Jameis Winston is a maybe. I think the world of Marcus Mariota out in Houston. But it's still, you don't know the full package there. Look how this league is going to be different in comparison to what we've seen it for the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Totally different in 5 years when you're not going to have those elite quarterbacks. And that's why I think it is going to change the philosophy of some of the teams. Todd Gurley opened the door. Zeke blew it wide open. And now I think he's got it open for Leonard Fournette to be a top 5 pick.
Yeah, let's talk about him. You know him. You said you've known him for a long time. You watched him play from the time he was a high school kid. So let's talk about it. And I've been getting like a mixed bag. It seems like some people put him down and they've almost cast him aside. And I was reading your report on him and just what he brings size-wise, speed-wise. Maybe really hasn't been utilized that much in the passing game yet. You feel like he can obviously be that type of impact player right away.
Oh, there's no question. Living in Louisiana, and I'm old enough, I saw Pete Maravich play as a kid. I mean, I was a real young kid, but I saw Pete play at LSU, and I saw Shaq. Well, Leonard Fournette's one of the 3 must-watch guys to ever come out of LSU, and 2 of them were basketball. So when you think about what impact he had in a television age, that people wanted to watch Leonard Fournette. And he's been like that since he was at St. Aug High School. He was an elite guy then. He's a big, strong, physical, north-south runner. He's a power guy. Every once in a while, he'll give you a little shimmy east-west. But he's a head up the field, I'll run over you or I'll run past you type individual. He didn't play up to what we thought as a junior because of the high ankle sprain, which happened in the summer. And that's normally a 6 to 8 week injury. He tried to play through it, re-injured it again, but we saw when he got healthy what he could do against Ole Miss when he broke the LSU single game rushing mark. So you've got a big man here, very smart. That's the one thing I tell everyone. Very intelligent young man. He picks things up extremely well. Is he a great receiver coming out of the backfield? No. He'll catch the ball, but there's a lot of bobble to it, which means that's an incomplete pass in the NFL. So he's got to work on catching the ball cleaner, coming out of the backfield. And also, he told me this summer, the one thing he really needed to work on was blitz protection skills, being a better pass blocker. But when you look at what he's done, and if your team is a run-oriented type club that wants to pound the rock, similar to what the Cowboys did with Zeke, similar to what maybe the Vikings did with Adrian Peterson, he's tailor-made for it. And he's marquee. Man, he's a guy that he's the name on the marquee, and when he steps on the field, he could well be the fastest player you have. He's the second fastest player on a very fast LSU team. Only Dante Jackson, who weighs about 175 pounds, and they got Victoria's Secret models with a bigger waist than him that could outrun Leonard. I mean, so, man, that's telling you at 250 pounds, you saw, at 240, you saw what he did at the Combine. And I've seen him run. I mean, he is a special athlete, and he is a very determined, very sharp young man. I think as we get closer, he's the name that you will be hearing a lot of NFL teams maybe trying to make a move to get up to get. It won't be the quarterback. It'll be Leonard Fournette. Because when you watch him, he's eye-catching on tape, other than if you flip on that Alabama game. They were the only team that could corral him pretty good, and that's because LSU couldn't throw the ball with a lick. But he's a special athlete, one of the special guys that I've seen in quite some time come out of Louisiana.
You're listening to the John Harris podcast on earnetwork.net. We're speaking with Mike Detillier, the author of the 2017 Mike Detillier's draft report, NFL draft report, 210 pages. You want to get a copy of it. Trust me, it's really good stuff. Mike, we're talking about running backs you mentioned Leonard Fournette, who you really think highly of. Let's touch on one other running back that we're going to jump around, maybe a couple other positions. Joe Mixon, Oklahoma. A lot of talk, a lot of controversy with what happened to him a couple years ago and how that will affect his draft status. But on the field, I'm hearing this guy's top-level talent.
There's no question about it. Life's not fair, and so you have to look at it through the reality part. If he didn't have the off-the-field issues, he would probably be a top 15 pick in his draft class. I mean, he's that good. He's a power runner who can also hit it with speed. He catches the ball real clean coming out of the backfield. Sure-handed kid. Got excellent field vision, and again, that combination of power and speed's there. It's just not a one-time issue with Joe, though. I mean, when you look into it, it's just not the one that was captured on film.
Right.
And no matter what, you got to walk away. Now, I understand the environment in which you grew up in, and, you know, but you got to walk away from those things. But he also had an altercation with a police lady when she gave him a ticket that he tore it up, threw it in her face, and confronted her. So now you've got multiple situations here in which anger got the best of him. Is he a tremendous football player? No question. I'll be willing to bet you all 32 coaches in this league would take him in a heartbeat. But eventually, before you pick him, you got to slide that folder over to the owner. And that owner's thinking about something else, that maybe I'm going to get backlash from this. There's going to be people that are really going to, you know, throw some flack on me for picking Joe Mixon up. And all this kind of came into reality for most people as it got close to the Sugar Bowl. Now, once that video got released, that was it. He was going to get tagged with it. He will not get picked in round one. But I'd be shocked, John, if he gets out of the second round because of his talent. Life's not fair. And talented people get more chances than maybe the hardworking average person does. And Joe Mixon is a talented athlete. That's reality of the world today. So I do think that he gets picked high, and I do think he's probably picked in round two. But you better have a coach that's willing to answer a lot of questions about Joe Mixon. But there are coaches like that, you know what, hey, listen, he's a ball player to me. But that general manager and that owner understand the after effects of picking Joe Mixon. And I've been told by 7 different teams, he's off our board. I will not slip that envelope over to my owner because I know how he is, and he would not approve of it. So 7 of them have already taken him off the board, and I think you'd probably say there's a few more than 7. But you know what? We're not running for the Senate, and we're not running for president, and the Electoral College doesn't come into play here. All you need is one team to pick you. And I think with Joe, he'll have a team pick him in round 2.
Like you said, all you need is one team. One team to like you. And there are plenty of teams that have proven through the years that they'll take a chance, be it a draft pick or a free agent. So, like you say, I won't be surprised to hear his name. He won't be picked on the first day, but don't be surprised for him to be picked on the second day.
The other thing, John, too, is every coach, and you've been around this like I have, every coach doesn't he think he's Dr. Phil? He's basically the sports Dr. Phil. I can cure every ill of any player.
Right.
I mean, you have to have a little bit of that arrogance to be a NFL head coach to begin with. But I think all of them have that one trait that they think they can coach anyone. And sometimes some can, and many times they can't.
Yeah. The offense, we've talked about quarterback, we've talked about running back, wide receiver. How does that position stack up this year? And do you see any wideouts going high in the draft this year?
It's a pretty thick class of receivers. It's not maybe the elite group as we've seen in other years, but I see 3 guys going in round 1, that being Mike Williams from Clemson, big, thickly built receiver, great size, kind of plays the ball in flight like a power forward in basketball. He gained separation with his size and also with his athleticism. Corey Davis, I think, is the best route runner of all the guys in this draft class from Western Michigan. Another big receiver who's got some giddy up after the step. And he's a guy that critical spots, he wants the football. And then John Ross from Washington, speed receiver, very similar build and game to Brandon Cooks, who was with New Orleans and is now with New England. Speed wide out, prefers the chalk, then going over the middle, can take that short little throw out in the flat, and then he takes off downfield. And he's got special separation skills. And he's got good hands for what you want to call a speed receiver. And then certainly after that, someone like Curtis Samuel, who I'm really impressed with. He's not a huge receiver, but he's got tremendous speed, great athlete. You can do a lot of different things with him. Could even use him as halfback at the NFL level if needed to be. Cooper Kupp, unbelievable, I'm getting old, but I knew his grandfather, who played actually with the original Saints in 1966. I wasn't covering the team then, but I knew I knew his grandfather Jake, and a big wide out from Washington, really good route runner, catches the ball well out front with his hands, and he's fearless. And then certainly D.D. Westbrook from Oklahoma, another speed wide out who can get downfield. And I think the one guy who most people aren't telling you they really like, but I think will go very early, and that's Chris Godwin from Penn State. The way he finished the season, a lot of people really like Chris Godwin. And he's one of those guys that may get picked in round 2, and you say, man, they had other guys that were saying before him. No, a lot of teams really like Godwin and the way he finished the season. And another guy that was a tremendous high school football player in Delaware, the Gatorade Player of the Year, really had a great junior season and finished it off strong in the Rose Bowl. And he's a young man that is gaining a lot of steam as we're getting closer to draft time.
Well, Mike, talk a little bit more about Godwin, because we have a strong Penn State following here on the Air Network. So that's not a name I had heard as far as high in the draft. So that's interesting that you feel that way about him.
Yeah, well, he's a young man that kind of really blossomed up last year. And, to me, what jumps out, 16.6 yards a catch. That's strong. And 11 touchdowns. He had a great game against USC, and he beat the stew out of Adoree Jackson a number of times. He caught 9 passes in that game. I think it's 187 yards, 2 scores. I think he surprised a few people by deciding to come out early. He's a good-sized receiver. He's a money player in the red zone. He knows how to find that weak spot downfield. Little wasted motion, getting into and out of his cut and break. Tremendous leaping skills. Physically needs to get a little stronger. Needs a little bit of work as a route runner, which all college receivers do. But he's got some special skills to him. Size-wise, foot speed, acceleration, and his ability to put a move on you and then gain extra separation downfield. Chris has got it, and I think he's a guy that I think ends up probably second round, or at worst in the top couple picks of round 3. There's a lot of buzz in the scouting community about Chris Godwin, and a lot of wide receiver coaches are waving the flag for him, and strongly.
Interesting. That's great stuff on Chris Godwin from Penn State. We'll definitely keep an eye on him. You mentioned the tight end position being one of the stronger ones. Let's touch on a couple of these guys that have you talking that way.
It's the best tight end group I've done in my 30 years. And, tight ends today are glorified big receivers. You're not finding a lot of these slam-bam inline run blockers. But I look at O.J. Howard, and, I got to see him play quite a bit in high school, and he was an upper echelon guy there. Alabama didn't throw the ball a lot to the tight end, but, man, when they did, he was money. And you're talking about a 6'5", 250-pound man who can run like what he can. He's a 4.5 guy in the 40-yard dash. For a 250-pound man, he can scoot. And he's a nightmare to match up against downfield. And really, again, he's a player that they didn't really throw to a lot. But you saw when they targeted him, he made the play, he got open, and he's a big receiver. I think he's a top 10 pick. And it would not surprise me that he's a top 5 pick. He's that talented. David Njoku from Miami, the best athlete of the tight end group. Again, a 6'4", 250-pound man who can run in that 4.55, 4.6 range. Great leaping skills, 37.5 vertical. Now, they didn't throw the ball a lot to him at Miami. But you see the athleticism, his foot speed. He needs work as being a more precise route runner and getting into and out of his cuts and breaks. Cleaner, running a cleaner route. He catches the ball a little bit up against his body sometimes. He's got to learn how to catch the ball a little bit better out front with his hands. But, boy, he's scary good. I mean, and when they threw him the football, he got an extra gear in open field with a big man with pads and a helmet on that he can pull away. Evan Ingram, been a favorite of mine. I got to see him at a couple camps when he came out of Georgia. He was a middle-range type recruit, not super highly recruited. Started day one at Ole Miss. And he has been a crackerjack football player, 6'3", 235. Again, another wide-out playing tight end. He causes you a lot of mismatch issues downfield. Bucky Hodges, also another big former quarterback, converted to tight end, who needs a little bit of work as a route runner. But here's a guy at Virginia Tech that caught 133 passes and 19 touchdowns. So that's impressive. Jake Butt coming off the knee injury. Very impressive football player, having played for Jim Harbaugh there. The sleeper of the group, though, is Adam Shaheen from Ashland.
I've heard about him in Ohio, yeah.
Yeah, and guy that was a transfer player, former basketball star, 6'6", 275. John, the one thing I see today is that a lot of linebackers can't cover. So if I've got all this talent, and I'll throw in Jordan Leggett from Clemson, a Gerald Everett, a small college kid from South Alabama, who's also a really good football player, you've got 7, 8, 9 guys, and probably 10 to 11 that will either end up in this draft class as starters or as significant role players. But the one thing I don't see today is linebackers and their ability to cover. And so now Shaheen comes in, and he's a 6'6", 275-pound kid from Ashland. And what he did there in a short period of time, 127 catches, and of those 127, 26 were touchdowns. So he's a huge red zone receiver, and he can motor for a big man, and he catches the ball real well. One thing with a basketball player, they don't catch the basketball up against their chest. They catch it with their hands. That's why a lot of these guys have made the transition very well. And I think he's a guy that will end up being a second or very early third-round pick. In other draft classes, Adam Shaheen would end up being a late first, early second. But because it's so thick at the tight end position, he's going to peel a little bit back and also to run on defensive backs. But we see here now how many tight ends we've talked about in a short period of time. They're all kind of glorified wideouts that have played some tight end. And then I didn't even bring up a George Kittle from Iowa or Billy Brown from the Maryland area who played at Shepherd, who's a wide receiver playing tight end. Jonnu Smith from Florida International, another really good prospect. And also Eric Sabolt from Drake. All these guys are going to play in the NFL and have the potential to start. How are you going to cover these guys? That tells me this game is going to start to change more and more, that you're going to see a lot of teams doing what Arizona has done. You've seen New England do a lot of it, New Orleans, in a lot of hybrid defenses where they take out the linebacker and they go to a nickel or a third safety, because you can't match up downfield with a 255-pound linebacker up against those tight ends. this draft class will change how a lot of defenses are played in the NFL over the course of time.
We're winding down on this edition of the John Harris podcast on the airnetwork.net. Our special guest is Mike Detillier, the author of the 2017 Mike Detillier Draft Report, 210 pages. Great stuff. You want to get a copy of it before we leave today, we'll let Mike tell you again how to pick up a copy. Mike, we're going to move over to defense real quick. We talked about Myles Garrett as a playmaker. Can you talk about a couple other defensive playmakers? Then I want to move over and want to talk. We always talk about the Steelers on this show and what you think about their draft needs coming up. But let's talk about a couple other defensive playmakers before we move on.
Well, up front, certainly Solomon Thomas from Stanford, Texas high school kid that has really blossomed into a terrific football player at Stanford. Not the biggest defensive lineman around, but a guy that reminds me a lot of Michael Bennett now with Seattle, in that in certain down and distance situations, I'm going to put him at defensive tackle up against a much less athletic offensive guard. Derek Barnett from Tennessee, who broke Reggie White's sack record at Tennessee. I mean, and so you're talking about some big-time players. I think Taco Charlton reminds me a lot of Justin Tuck. When he came out of Notre Dame and was a really good player with the Giants. And I think the two guys intriguing to a lot of people early, Carl Lawson from Auburn, who put up big numbers when he was healthy, but he had a lot of nicks and scrapes at Auburn, and Jordan Willis from Kansas State, who has been a really, really good football player there for them. And the best defensive lineman that's come out of there, you got to go back to Darren Howard in the early 2000s. In the middle, certainly Jonathan Allen. All this stuff, man, all these ESPN guys are being fed all this information from other agents about how bad the shoulder is. That's a way down the road issue. Jonathan Allen's one of the top 5 players in this draft class. Malik McDowell from Michigan State, great athlete, just a good player. You would think he's an upper echelon guy, just as his motor doesn't run hot. And that's concerning to me. Caleb Brantley from Florida, another guy who's been nicked up a lot at the University of Florida injury-wise. But, man, when he's been healthy, he is some type of football player. And then as an outside linebacker, edge rusher, Takaris McKinley from UCLA. I think the world of him as a football player. A guy that can really get up the field, rush the quarterback. Zach Cunningham, who has played inside, but some teams are looking at him out on the edge as an edge pass rusher. Very, very interesting player in that he can do a lot for your football team. Certainly T.J. Watt from Wisconsin, who's been outstanding. Inside linebacker Reuben Foster, the best inside linebacker in this group, and I think one of the top 5 players. But I think the fastest riser, and when I put out my book, I put him as the 15th best player. There's no way he gets to 15. And I think that's Hassan Reddick from Temple. I think he's a young man that could end up being a top 10 player, has played with his hand in the dirt as a defensive end, as a stand-up outside linebacker. The Senior Bowl, they moved him to middle linebacker, and he was awesome. I mean, absolutely awesome there. I think he ends up being a top 10 football player and an impact performer in the NFL.
Wow. And how about in the secondary? I know there's a safety that you're pretty familiar with, a top 5 talent from LSU.
Yeah, Jamal Adams is a guy, I saw play a lot of football at LSU. I saw him when he was in the high school ranks, and he was the best safety coming out of high school. He's come in here, been a 2.5-year starter for LSU. He's tremendous in run support. He's good in the coverage part of the game. He can match up well downfield. Instinctive, aggressive, rarely takes a false step to the football. Reminds me a lot of Eric Berry with Kansas City today, in that he can do so many things for your football team, and he's a leader. Last year when Les Miles got fired and Coach O took over, he's the first one to tell me, the leader back there was Jamal. We're not going to let this bring us down. And he said, he kind of took over along with Duke Riley on defense. Hey, listen, we're not letting this team down because, Coach Miles got fired. And he said he was really one of my top leaders all year long. And you saw against Louisville, when they played in the Citrus Bowl, he made a play on a pitch to to a running back where he looked at as though that back was going to cut the corner, and Jamal Adams came out of nowhere and made a play and tackled him in the backfield. You said, wow. Now, if anybody didn't know he was fast and had to go to LSU's pro day, then you're not watching football. I mean, I knew he was fast. Again, working with a lot of track sprinters, every time they run a little different time. You're not talking about Usain Bolt here. So I think he's a top 5 pick, and he's an instant starter in the NFL. Reminds me a lot, this is old schooling now, but it reminds me a lot of Kenny Easley coming out of UCLA.
Yeah.
Great career with Seattle, and now is going into the NFL Hall of Fame. He's that type player. I mean, he tilts the field when he's out there.
Wow. Any cornerbacks that we need to look at? Any DBs that can step right in and play?
I think if he was healthy, Marshawn Lattimore, but this concerns me because he's had a chronic hamstring problem at Ohio State. And if I'm using a top 5, 6, 7 pick, and that's where I think he'll go, it is a concern for me. Had it not been for that, his draft grade would have been very similar to Patrick Peterson when he came out of LSU. That's how good he is. Got great ball skills, can make plays with the football in flight, super sharp. I feel bad for Sidney Jones, who would have been my number 2 cornerback, but because of the Achilles, I think drops him into the second round. Marlon Humphrey is a good zone cover corner, tremendous athlete, covered his dad Bobby when he was a running back at Alabama and in the NFL. Tre'Davious White, who I've seen play a lot of football, former quarterback in high school, made the conversion to cornerback, been a 3-year starter. And certainly Jerry Conley from Ohio State, who I think a lot of. I think he's one of the unheralded guys in this draft class that I think will turn up big, first-round pick type performer in the NFL. And I can't wait to watch Adoree Jackson from USC. And while he's rough around the edges as a cover guy, his impact as a punt kick return guy will be immediate in the NFL.
Mike, there's some great stuff here. Let's try to put it all together. And we like to always focus and talk about the Steelers here on the Air Network. And how do you see this draft fitting into their needs? I mean, they're loaded on offense. There's no way I can see them taking an offensive player in the first round with their first pick. Where do you see them going?
I feel the exact same way. And so for me, when I looked at what's been the kind of not kickstart has been their ability to match up downfield in coverage or an impact guy coming off the edge. So it comes down to cornerback and outside linebacker. I think getting a guy that can influence the quarterback on a play. And again, some of the names that I brought up, I think will come into play here, like a Marlon Humphrey from Alabama, or Tre'Davious White from LSU, who could be there when they select. Carl Lawson from Auburn. Again, if you get over the fact that he's had some injuries and that clears, you fine with that. A T.J. Watt from Wisconsin, also another young man who can really get up the field and rush the quarterback, or Charles Harris from Missouri. Those are the players that you've got to look at in round 1, because you know who you have to beat to get to the big game. You know who you have to beat to get there. And so for me, that would be an area where I would take a real strong look at in round 1 and kind of look and see what falls to me into the second round. Because if I go cornerback, one of the guys to watch in round 2 would be Tyus Bowser from Houston. Very underrated edge rusher at outside linebacker. And I think he's a young man that would fit great with the Steelers. So I want somebody who can help me in the coverage part of the game, and I want somebody who can help me rush the quarterback. Because offensively, other than, say, maybe, because you don't know about Ladarius Green at the tight end position, he missed a tremendous amount of time. Using an early pick on an offensive player, I'd be surprised. But somewhere in this draft, you got to know the age of Ben Roethlisberger, and you may have to go quarterback fairly early. And so if they go offense early, I think it would be at quarterback. But I think you have to address the cornerback / pass rusher in the first 2 picks.
Yeah. Mike Detillier. It's great stuff, man. Mike, the author of the 2017 draft report. Mike, before we let you go here on the Air Network, tell the listeners again how they can order your draft report. It's 210 pages. It's great stuff.
Yeah, they can order it off of saintsreport.com, or also off of MikeDetillier.com, and it's spelled DETILLIER.com. And they can order it from there. We'll ship it out to you first class, $23, and we'll get it to you real quick.
Mike, I can't thank you enough, man. I know this is a real busy time of year for you, but it's been great. I could have you on for another hour, but I know you got a lot of stuff to do. Thank you so much for your time, man. And we're gonna keep this relationship going, and we've got some things planned in the Air Network down the line. I'd like to involve you in them if we can. So let's stay in touch.
We'll do it. Thanks so much, John. Always my pleasure.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the John Harris Podcast. Join us again next week for John Harris exclusively on the airnetwork.net.